And good evening to Ridgecrest Talk. Your host Paul VanderWerf, talking a great project here in the community gardening with the Ridgecrest Presbyterian Church. My guests tonight, Hannah VanNevel and Mark Morley. And Hannah, let's go ahead and get to know you a little bit first. Why don't you just tell us a little bit, where are you in your schooling and your experiences here in the community?
I am a senior at Burroughs this year, and playing soccer there.
All right, so you're on the soccer team. You guys are just getting ready for the season, right?
Yes, our first game's in December.
Oh man, that's right around the corner. You doing a lot of conditioning?
Not as much now, getting ready for season, playing as a team.
That's the first thing I think of when December is the start of the sport. Is I used to run that hill going up to the college every day, and that was not fun. But once the season started, then it was having a lot of fun playing the sport. So you're at Burroughs High School as a senior, playing soccer. What are the other activities that you have besides school that you've done here in the community?
I am active in Taekwondo and Girl Scouts.
All right, and those are activities you actually done for years and years, right?
Yes.
Like, how many years have you done Taekwondo?
9 years.
And for Girl Scouts?
10.
10 years with, so you actually have quite a few activities you've done for quite a few years.
Yes.
Right, and now the culmination of your Girl Scout experience is this special project that we're talking about today, the community garden. And so why don't you just tell us a little bit about your Girl Scout experience. You had mentioned earlier, like, the award is a gold award, and then you also have some awards that you did before that. Why don't you explain how the Girl Scouts works for that recognition?
You start with a bronze award, which is the first level. You do that in around 5th grade age. You can do that in a group, like in your troop, or individually. We did it as a troop, and we made food for Habitat for Humanity. Then once you earn that, you earn your silver award in around 8th grade. And you do that as an individual project. I repainted some wall billboards at an elementary school. And then once you've done those 2 awards, then that's the easiest way to move on to earning your gold award.
And so that's the gold award, is the whole culmination of the Girl Scout experience.
Yes.
And I think they say, compared to Boy Scouts, the Eagle Award would be the equivalent. And not everybody gets to that level. It's probably that top 1 to 3% or something like that actually get to that level. And so that community service attitude or heart you've had since like 5th grade, you're saying that you did the first project, and this was your big project, which just got done, what, a few months ago?
Yeah.
And so how did you decide what kind of project you're going to do? How did you come to that idea?
Well, the idea originated kind of with my parents and the pastor at the church. And once they presented it to me, it seemed like a really good idea. And it did address a need in the community that I saw. And once they presented the project idea to me, it just got rolling, got excited about it.
Right. And so I think we were actually talking about, like, what was the easiest part of the project, and what would you say would be the easiest part?
Getting the help from people. You just
Right.
asked people in the community, and they just came out and donated time, materials.
Now, you saying that here on TV, you might have people coming to you afterwards saying, what's the secret? Because most people in the community say the hardest part of getting things done is getting people involved and getting help. And you're saying that in this situation, you just had all these people that were coming together and helping out with that. For those of you who don't know where the Ridgecrest Presbyterian Church is, it's on Las Flores Boulevard, right next to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and right across the street from the Las Flores Elementary School. And the community garden that you guys have set up, anybody driving down the street that looks at the church will see that garden right at the start. It's the raised beds. What kind of wood do they have on those?
Redwood.
So they're redwood raised beds that are visible right from the street. And I happen to be able to make the attendance for when you guys kind of made the blessing and the official opening of the community garden. Why don't you talk a little bit about that culmination and that experience? I mean, how many raised beds did you guys put in?
I think it's around 15.
All right, so 15 raised beds, and of course everybody came together to build those. And then how did you do your soil? How did you decide to do that?
We got fill dirt from the city, and so that's what a majority of the bed's filled with pine needles and cardboard on the bottom. and then we filled it mostly with fill dirt, and the last couple inches we mixed with raised bed potting soil, worm castings, and horse manure.
All right, so it sounds like you had a lot of materials that were brought together for that.
Yes.
Now, I think some people say, you know, the last thing we need in the desert is to be watering plants. How did you address the watering issue for the community garden?
It's all on drip irrigation, so it's on a timer too. So we don't water more often than we need to.
Right, and I think that's what everybody says is you can go to Xeriscape and you can go to all these changes, but the truth is if you just water your plants what they need without overwatering, that's 80% of the savings right there. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the community garden and your project. Let's go ahead and introduce Mark Morley here for just a moment. Mark, why don't you just tell us real quickly what's your role with the community garden?
Well, when I moved here 2.5 years ago, I spoke to the people at Ridgecrest Presbyterian Church about possibility of a community garden. I was told no because it used too much water. Then Hannah was coming up with an idea for her Girl Scouts, what she wanted to do, and we got talking about it. And, it instigated Pastor Ralph, myself, and Hannah putting it together that we would go ahead with it, pull out all the old junipers and go ahead. Now, I'm primarily just an advisor because I can't do any physical work. So I give them the advice that they need. I don't know if I already mentioned that I'm a horticulturist degree. I got in 1982 at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So I've worked in nursery business, landscape business, and also an advisor of a community garden in Nodi. So I've had a lot of experience. I know what needs to be done, and it's just coming back to the desert to, figuring out how much water things need, taking wind into consideration, for example. So I'm more of an advisor.
Right, and having a horticulturist as an advisor is a good way to get started, Hannah. We're going to talk some more about this community garden project right after we go to break. This is Paul VanderWerf hosting Ridgecrest Talk with our guests from the Ridgecrest Presbyterian Church Community Garden. Welcome back, Ridgecrest Talk. Your host, Paul VanderWerf, talking community gardening with the Ridgecrest Presbyterian Church Community Garden that's just set up shop recently with our real community developer, Hannah VanNevel. And one of the great things that we do is we get an advisor who has a background in the area, Mark Morley. And Mark, we were talking just before break. You came back to the community a few years ago and had experience as a horticulturist, going to college at San Luis Obispo, which has a great program, and then also working with some community gardens. You also grew up here in Ridgecrest, right?
Yes, I did.
And how many years ago back was that high school graduation?
Oh, I graduated in 1974.
So 74 was back, I think, my junior high school days, and I was still here, but I was not at the high school too much yet. And so coming back with the community garden, it just seems like a real match that you saw a need and you were kind of looking for that. And then we had somebody who's looking for a good community project. And I think that's where, Hannah, you said that was the part that came together. Once you heard the need and you looked at it, you said, hey, community garden's going to work real well. And so let's just back up a little bit. Hannah, I want to talk a little bit more because one of the things that really strikes me about young people is that there's an ambition there and a challenge to do something that you don't know what failure is. Sometimes as we get older, we say there's 100 reasons why we can't do the project instead of finding a way to do the project. Well, you are saying, well, I'm doing the project, and you just went and did it. and the idea that you can't get help. That's one of the big things that all of us gardeners talk about is as we get older, we know how to do it, but our backs and our muscles aren't ready to do it, and we love to get young people that have that energy to do it. 9 years of soccer.
Probably more.
And through all those years, I'm sure there's ups and downs with sports, because I played a lot of sports, and I really relied on that in some of my adult challenges of how to overcome those challenges. One of the things that I think is an important point is that we don't just go to school and not have the extracurricular activities, but we know with girls that they typically drop out of sports at age 14. So you're an exception. You're, what, 17 now?
Yes.
And you're 3 years past that drop-off point, which means you're one of those girls that stuck through with the sports. Talk about that for a minute, just with your soccer. Has that always been easy, or has it always been hard, or what do you think?
It's been up and down. There are definitely years where it's been harder to stick with it. Challenges, injuries, just sometimes not wanting to go back. But I've always loved the game, and I figured, why quit when I can just keep working through it, when I know there's going to be something better when I work through these issues.
Right,
So.
and that's what I think is the real key with doing so with sports. You may not become a professional soccer player, but yet you've learned so much about winning and losing, about trying and coming back and trying again, that we know that that students are more likely to go to college after they've done that. And speaking of college, what are your ideas as far as what you want to study and what colleges you might want to go?
I want to be a veterinarian, and I want to go back east or in the Midwest for college.
All right, so you're really looking, and I think we talked about that. Right now is that time when you're sending out your applications and you're picking those top 1, 2, or 3, but until you actually start getting some responses back that either you're accepted or not accepted, you don't know what your options are yet. What would be your number one pick if you got to go wherever you wanted?
My number one pick would probably be University of Illinois.
Wow, that's a little bit colder than here in Ridgecrest, that's for sure.
Yes.
And so you've already picked a challenging field. Being a veterinarian requires a lot of study, a lot of effort and dedication, and you've already got this goal lined up. And I think sometimes as gardeners and as older people in the community, we almost look at you as a young person as being a seedling, that you're going to grow into this plant, that you've already got this nurturing, you've already got this all this rich foundation that you need to be successful. And I think that's really great. And what about with the Taekwondo? You've done that for 9 years also?
Yes.
What would you say would be the best part of Taekwondo?
Right now, it's definitely being able to teach, because I'm just learning how to teach and going through the certification process of being a certified instructor. And I love being able to go in there about 2 to 3 times a week and just help out and teach.
So who are you typically teaching? Is it people your age or younger people? Or?
Normally younger, elementary school kids.
And so now you're actually becoming one of the teachers for the younger kids as they're coming up.
I just love being able to go and help them. And when they see me outside, they're always they're excited to see me. And it just makes me feel really good to be able to give back to them. Because I know I looked up to my instructors a whole lot when I was their age. And so it feels good to be able to do something for them and keep that next generation.
And that is an awesome feeling. I remember being that age and working with some of the kids, and they really look up to you, sometimes even more so than the regular teachers, because you're a little bit younger and they see you coming through the steps. Let's go back over to Mark now, talking about our community garden. There's actually a transition that we started the community garden originally, and then there's a handoff where you set up all the area and the soil and all the things that you needed for it, and then once everything's in place, you're handing it off to Mark and the church and the community for the operational phase. And I think we were when was it, Mark, that we were out there?
About a month ago.
Was it September?
Yes.
And in September, they the pastor was there, and they had a blessing, and must have been about 20 youth and adults that were there for the kind of the opening ceremony for the facility.
It was a dedication.
Dedication, there you go. And Mark, what were the crops that you had planted then?
At that time, we primarily had tomatoes, lots of tomatoes, and different types of peppers, melon, squash, and they had just planted some corn.
Right.
So
I remember I was a little
that's
jealous of that big mama marigold you had in that one.
oh
That one
yes,
first bed. That one really looked like it was doing well. Now, getting into winter, we're going to go into a different set of crops, and we talked about that a little bit on Ridgecrest Talk. That you want to go into plants that do better with the cooler temperatures. Have you guys planted those yet?
we've planted some of it. There's a continuation where once you get one crop, then you wait about a month and you plant another crop. And we use primarily like the cold crops and the lettuces and things like that that will handle the cold temperatures. While if we planted tomatoes and peppers, they would freeze. So the lettuce and the broccoli and the cauliflower, all those will hold up. And so that's what we're concentrating in right now.
All right, we're going to have to go ahead and take a break right here. Ridgecrest Talk, Paul VanderWerf talking community gardening. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Ridgecrest Talk. Your host, Paul VanderWerf, community gardening in Ridgecrest at the Ridgecrest Presbyterian Church. And I have to admit that community gardening is something that we need to do more in the community. I know there's different groups talking about it. There is Compassionate Doctors folks that have put in a little community garden next to the City Hall, and there's some other small projects that are being worked. But Mark, we had talked just before the break about cole crops.
Yes.
And I think that's a real confusion when people are sitting at home and they hear the word. It's cole is actually what C-O-L-E.
Yes.
Cole versus cold crops. Because they're in the winter, sometimes we hear cold crops like it's cold, but cold crops really is talking about the brassica family,
Yes, it is.
which is your mustards and your cabbages and your lettuces and those types of things,
Yes.
right? And so those are the types of crops that you plant at the winter time. And some people don't realize that. Something like a tomato, if you're in a tropical location, you can grow that tomato year round.
Yes.
But as soon as it freezes, it's not going to be able to survive that. And that's why we typically have it as an annual versus a perennial here in the desert. Let's talk a minute, Mark, about community gardens, that there's kind of different methods or ways that community garden can be set up. What are some of the ways that you've heard of or thought of as far as how a community garden can be set up?
Well, there's different ways. One of them is to have basically a large farm-type plot where just different plants are planted in sections or in rows, depending on how they want to do it. And the whole group will harvest it together, work together as one. Another way, I'll use the Santa Barbara community garden as an example, where everybody has a 10 by 20 foot plot. And, you know, you go in and you take care of your plot and you're responsible for it. And you usually pay a low fee, just basically to cover the water bills. And the way we did it in Lodi was we had 5 by 15 foot sections, and we had rent out one section or two plots per person that was interested. But most of those people actually ended up working the whole garden instead of just their plot. So it gets the community more involved rather than just, well, this is my plot and I'm only going to take care of my plot. And that's the way at that RPC community garden, we have it set so that you're more interested in the whole garden, you know, rather than an individual plot. Now we do have one that's a private plot, but we do the watering, we do the weeding, you know, and they do come by and pick some of the fruit every now and then, but they're not regular at picking it. So sometimes we will go through and just say, okay, hey, you got some stuff you have over here that you need to harvest. So.
Right. Now, what was the experience when you went to the church and the community and said, okay, is there anybody interested in having your own plot? Here's your own raised bed. Did you get much of a response to that?
You know, at first we really did. But it seemed to kind of drop off, and people seemed to be more interested in the garden as a whole. And that's the same thing that in Lodi, we saw the same thing. And it's great to see people wanting to work together instead of wanting to say, this is mine. And,
Right.
the attitude we all have from childhood that, I want to do this and it's only this.
Well, that's
So
one of the things I say is community garden is 2 words, community and garden. And between the two, the community is probably the most important.
oh,
Is
definitely.
getting those people to come together and to share and work. Now, Hannah, you have some gardening experience and raised beds at home. Did you see that being the same at home when you were there at the community garden, or did you see some differences?
There were some differences. We just changed the watering system to be more efficient. And then we're looking at the raised beds at my house. We have greenhouses over them. So we're looking into maybe doing something like that at the community garden as well.
Right, something like a low tunnel or some type of
Yeah.
cover so that they can survive the freezing temperatures.
Yes.
Right, and I think that's the key is you start comparing, well, we have a different watering system, that's an improvement. But the truth is in a garden is it's never finished.
True.
A garden is always changing, it's
Always
always
changing.
growing. So Mark, we talked about different ways that we can do the community garden. And then one of the parts is who's taking the produce home. And so what have you found are the ways that the produce is being used that you're
Well,
raising there?
mostly, we had a lot larger garden in Lodi, and what we found is that, on Sunday we would set out what we had harvested on Saturday, and let the members of the church there take what they wanted. Well, they'd probably only take about 5% of what we had harvested. So the rest of it we would take to places like the Women's Shelter, the Senior Center, and Salvation Army. And the majority of places we donated the produce to received it with open arms and were very happy to get it. That's one thing Salvation Army needs to learn is that they can take produce with open arms. So
Well, I think they may not
rather
be
than it
used to
be-
getting local produce
yes,
that's freshly
supermarket
grown.
stuff. So
Yeah, I was at the Children's Garden at North Carolina State in this past July, and they had harvested their vegetables, and they were just giving those away. And I was pulling out my wallet to buy some vegetables. They said, no, just take whatever you want. And I just thought, wow, that's kind of neat to be able to have that opportunity. And so
Yes.
you had the right now it sounds like you have the community coming together to do the work, and you're able to provide a lot of the produce to some of the nonprofits in the community,
yes.
and that's a great way to start. Now, how are people been hearing about you? How have they been getting involved?
Well, I have to say Hannah is a great motivator at getting people to help.
Well, let's ask
And-
Hannah then. How have you been getting people involved?
We set up a Facebook page. It's RPC Community Garden, and we post a lot of updates of photos of what's going on when we're working. So that's been definitely a way to get people involved. And then also just word of mouth. We just tell people, and it just gets passed along,
Right, and so except for some of our older folks that are kind of stick in the muds that we don't want to use Facebook, that's probably the easiest way is to go on Facebook and look for the community garden and then get involved with it that way. If you're not using that, we have word of mouth, and then how do they contact somebody there at the church?
They could just leave a message at the church for either Mark or my mother, Kim. And then the message,
Pastor
or
Ralph.
Pastor Ralph, and it just gets passed along, and they'll contact you on what we need, what we can get, how you can get involved.
Right, and actually it sounds like we have a lot of opportunities, and that's the whole thing with the community garden. It's a community. We're just about ready to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us. This is Paul VanderWerf with our guests, Hannah VanNevel and Mark Morley. Thank you for tuning in to Ridgecrest Talk.